Imagine sitting comfortably in your favorite chair, sipping tea when suddenly your heart jolts like a grenade, exploding in your chest. A surge of panic grips you as the air grows suffocatingly thick each breath, a struggle every heartbeat, a scream for help. Your eyes dart to the clock. Only 5 agonizing minutes have passed since that toxic relative barged through your door, hurling demands and venomous words that drain your very soul. 5 minutes and your blood pressure rockets toward danger. 5 minutes and your heart clenches violently, desperately signaling a deadly warning. Ignore these symptoms and you might as well prepare for disaster, a catastrophic stroke, or devastating heart attack lurking just moments away. Yes, when you reach your 70s, the terrifying truth is that not all family interactions are safe. Bitter arguments, manipulative guilt trips, and relentless intrusions from those closest to you can rapidly push your stress levels to lethal heights. And here's the bone-chilling reality no one dares to admit. The people you share blood with might be silently steering you toward emotional and physical ruin. Family should mean love, comfort, and protection, right? Think again. For countless older adults, certain relatives morph into relentless tormentors, fueling waves of anxiety, crushing depression, and toxic stress, capable of destroying your health from within. This isn't mere annoyance, it's psychological warfare that transforms your home into a daily battleground. Choose to ignore or underestimate these destructive forces, and your peaceful golden years could swiftly descend into unimaginable horror. Transition, a true or composite clinical story showcasing the damage. Let's take the example of Helen, a composite representation of several patients I've encountered. She's a 74-year-old retired librarian who thought her golden years would be spent crocheting blankets and gardening with her grandchildren. Instead, Helen ended up on a hospital gurney with severe chest pains that felt like her heart might burst. The doctors found her blood pressure was dangerously high. No obvious infection, no recent accidents, but an ongoing conflict with her adult nephew had been eroding her peace. For weeks, he would show up unannounced, demand money, and guilt her into fulfilling his every whim. Over time, those unrelenting visits triggered heightened cortisol levels, the body's stress hormone leading to a hypertensive emergency. That terrifying episode forced Helen to see that boundaries weren't just optional. They were an absolute necessity for survival. Helen's story illustrates a shocking reality. Emotional stress is not just all in your head. It can strain your arteries, unsettle your heartbeat, and contribute to the buildup of plaque. The daily pressure from a troublesome relative can act like a slow poison culminating in chest pains or even more devastating outcomes like a stroke. When Helen was wheeled into the emergency room, she realized that if she had recognized the toxic behavior earlier and made bold decisions to protect herself, she might have spared her heart that terrifying day. Unfortunately, many seniors remain silent or endure these emotional burdens, fearing the stigma of distancing themselves from family. But physical health is not a commodity you can sacrifice at will. As you'll see, each day you remain in a toxic environment is a day you gamble with your future well-being. What? 1. Science. Why stressful interactions affect seniors more severely. You might wonder what makes people over 70 more vulnerable to stress from toxic relatives than younger individuals. The explanation can be found in the science of aging and stress physiology. According to a 2021 report by the World Health Organization, WHO, older adults often experience a reduction in resilience due to changes in the immune system, hormonal fluctuations, and natural wear and tear on the body. As you age, your body produces higher baseline levels of stress hormones like cortisol. These hormones can remain elevated longer and contribute to inflammation and blood pressure spikes when emotional turmoil persists. When a younger adult faces a stressful situation, they might have the physiological buffer to recover more quickly. For many seniors, however, that buffer is diminished, so repeated confrontations with negative relatives can exact a much steeper price on long-term health. Furthermore, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health 2017 Journal of Health Psychology highlights how chronic stress significantly raises the risk of heart disease, stroke, and other life-threatening conditions. Your body's stress response was originally designed for fleeting dangers, like an encounter with a wild animal allowing you to escape or fight. But if the danger is a family member who badgers you day after day, your system never gets a proper chance to reset. Imagine your alarm bell ringing nonstop inside your body, draining your energy and jeopardizing your cardiovascular health. This leads to a prolonged state of heightened alert, resulting in consistent surges of adrenaline and cortisol. Over time, that can undermine the heart immune system and even cognitive function. This vicious cycle is especially detrimental for older adults who need to preserve their health for a better quality of life. To put it in simpler terms, a younger individual might handle a single confrontation or negative phone call with only a minor increase in anxiety or blood pressure. In contrast, a 73-year-old could face the same phone call and experience an escalated heart rate that lingers for hours, leading to disrupted sleep, compromised immune function, and a general sense of fatigue. Multiply that by a series of encounters or messages over the course of a week, and you see how it quickly evolves into chronic damaging stress. Dr. Michael Greger, M.D. 2015, How Not to Die, points out that social interactions have a measurable impact on longevity. The presence of negativity can effectively erode not only mental well-being, but also your body's capacity to fend off disease. Therefore, identifying and mitigating toxic relationships is not a luxury. It's a medical necessity. Asiminorm, outline of the 6 toxic types and why they matter. In the coming sections, we'll address 6 categories of relatives that can be deeply harmful if they regularly undermine your sense of peace. These categories align with what older adults commonly face: relentless demands, incessant negativity, manipulative guilt tactics, boundary infringements, controlling interference, and recurring emotional abuse disguised as concern. While family bonds are significant, sometimes the mental and physical toll is too high. You may feel uneasy about distancing yourself from a sibling or a cousin you've known for decades. Perhaps you fear the social repercussions. People might label you heartless or claim you've abandoned your loved ones. However, think about the potential cost to your health. The real question is, what price are you paying every day you allow these toxic patterns to persist? By learning to recognize and address these issues, you can regain control over your life. This is not a manifesto urging you to cut off all family ties or to spend your golden years in isolation. Far from it. The objective is to help you see that certain relationships can transition from mild inconvenience to severe personal harm, especially after you've reached an age where your health becomes more fragile. It's about employing protective strategies, gently but firmly establishing boundaries, and even seeking outside help if the toxicity has spiraled out of control. Over the next chapters, we'll dissect each toxic type. We'll also examine practical steps to manage them, from polite refusals to forging new habits that enhance your independence. The goal is not to spread fear indiscriminately, but to alarm you just enough that you take meaningful action for your own longevity and emotional harmony. Pertushun. 1. The perpetually demanding relative. Why they're dangerous. Have you ever felt that a particular family member treats you like an endless fountain of time and resources? You might pick up their groceries, their children loan them money, or listen to them complain for hours without them offering even a shred of consideration for your own constraints. These perpetually demanding relatives can be particularly harmful once you pass 70. Physical stamina decreases your tolerance for stress, narrows, and the risk of a stress-related event like a stroke rises. If you're constantly on edge because you worry you'll be asked for yet another favor, the anxiety can build to a dangerous crescendo. The key point: this person's needs overshadow your legitimate requirement for rest and calm. That imbalance can become lethal for an older adult trying to protect cardiovascular health and emotional stability. Case study: Frank, age 76. Frank, a 76-year-old former accountant, found himself in a debilitating cycle with his younger cousin. She would call him at all hours, pleading for help with everything from household chores to paying her bills online, claiming she was just not good with technology. Initially, Frank complied. He had the time, and his caring nature prompted him to want to help, but the requests multiplied. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her demands expanded into daily errands, extended visits, and unplanned drives across town. Each time Frank tried to set a boundary, she accused him of being cold. Frank's blood pressure began creeping up, and he started having dizzy spells. That's when his doctor confirmed that chronic stress was eroding his cardiovascular system. This forced Frank to realize that perpetual demands aren't simply inconvenient. They can sabotage physical well-being. The science behind stress from demanding people. Why does constant neediness from family members become such a big issue? Well, from a physiological standpoint, ongoing requests or emotional blackmail trigger what's called an anticipatory stress response. You're not only dealing with the stress of the moment, you're also living in dread of the next request. This can inflate cortisol levels to the point where your immune system weakens your arteries, stiffen, and your sleep quality diminishes. The World Health Organization has repeatedly warned that chronic stress compounds the risk of hypertension in older adults. If you can't rest because you fear the next phone call or surprise visit that demands you jump into action, your body never retreats from high alert. For older individuals with less recovery capacity, this heightened vigilance can become a direct path to long-term health crises. Action plan for demanding relatives to combat this: create firm rules, like setting specific times when you are available to talk or help, and communicate these boundaries clearly. For instance, let the person know you'll answer calls only between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m., or that you'll contribute financially only once per month up to a certain amount. Put these rules in writing if necessary and share them with someone you trust, so you have an accountability partner. If the relative gets offended, remind yourself that respecting these guidelines is not selfish. According to Dr. Michael Greger, establishing emotional and logistical limits is a fundamental part of healthy aging. You are protecting your own longevity, not shutting the door forever. If the individual persists in ignoring your boundaries, consider speaking with a counselor or support group to strategize safe, firm methods of reducing contact. Caution. 2. The chronically negative pessimist. Why negativity is toxic after 70. A second category involves the doomsayers who see every glass as half empty. A bit of venting now and again is normal, but a relentless pattern of negativity can drag you into a psychological pit. This is critical in later life because your emotional resources are often more limited. A consistently negative companion can feed your fears, sap your motivation, and turn you into a sponge for gloom. If every phone call or family get-together is laden with defeatist talk about money, health, or the state of the world, you risk adopting a similar attitude. The real danger: prolonged negativity correlates with higher inflammatory markers in the body, potentially pushing you closer to issues like arterial plaque buildup or immune system dysfunction. This form of toxicity is not just mental, it can be physically devastating. Case study. Margaret, age 78. Margaret, a 78-year-old retired teacher, had a cousin who called her daily. Without fail, these conversations revolved around how everything was going wrong: the economy, the rising cost of medical care, the failing morality of society. After hanging up, Margaret often felt anxious, short of breath, and hopeless. Over time, this sense of constant despair seeped into her own worldview. She found it harder to enjoy gardening, meeting friends at a local senior club, or even reading her favorite novels. Eventually, her physician noticed elevated blood pressure and signs of chronic stress. The impetus: an unending barrage of pessimism from that near-daily phone call. When Margaret learned to limit these interactions, both in frequency and duration, her blood pressure readings improved, and she regained some of her lost enthusiasm for life. Scientific insight: brain and mood connection. Neuroscientists have shown that repeated exposure to negativity can rewire neural pathways, making your mind more prone to a constant alert or anxious state. In older adults whose brains are already more susceptible to cognitive decline, this can exacerbate problems with memory and concentration. According to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, older individuals under perpetual mental strain see a faster reduction in mental acuity compared to peers in healthier social settings. Over time, these changes ripple into physical health outcomes as well. Chronic negativity can worsen insomnia, making it more difficult for your body to replenish critical hormones that protect against infection and cell damage. The interplay between the mind and the body becomes glaringly evident. Adopting a perpetually defensive or fearful mindset can actually deteriorate your heart and immune system. Action plan for the pessimist. If you're struggling with a toxic pessimist, your action plan should revolve around interrupting the negativity cycle. First, tactfully steer conversations toward any faint glimmer of positivity or neutral topics. For example, if they complain about healthcare costs, you might segue by mentioning a new healthy recipe you tried or a helpful community resource you discovered. If they persist, don't be afraid to end the call. Express empathy, acknowledge that you understand their concerns, but calmly state that you need to preserve your own emotional balance. Practicing what some psychologists call selective ignoring can also help. You can respond politely at first, but if they repeat the same gloomy statements, offer a gentle sign-off. Over time, you'll train them to either limit the negative rants or find someone else to unload upon. Protecting your own mental health is non-negotiable. 3. The master of guilt and manipulation. Why this is especially harmful for seniors. Next, we have the guilt-tripping relative, someone who wields emotional manipulation like a weapon. Picture them saying things like, "You never call me. Don't you care about family? Or if you truly loved me, you'd do this." These statements might seem harmless, but they can plunge you into a chronic state of anxiety and emotional confusion, especially if you're already somewhat isolated. Many seniors have fewer social outlets. Guilt inducers exploit this to keep them captive. The heavy weight of guilt can induce self-doubt and a desperate need to prove your loyalty, driving you to overextend yourself financially, physically, or emotionally. Constant guilt from a family member can raise your stress hormones to alarming levels, potentially leading to cardiac problems or even strokes if left unaddressed over the long term. Case study: Pauline, age 72. Pauline is 72, a widow, and has a big heart for her extended family. Her niece, seeing her kindness, started using guilt-laden language to secure endless babysitting services for her children. At first, Pauline was overjoyed to watch her grandnieces, but the demands became more intense. If Pauline suggested she needed a break, she was bombarded with statements like, "Oh, so you don't want to see your grandnieces succeed in life." Over time, Pauline found herself sacrificing her personal time, her sleep, and even her cherished weekly get-togethers with friends just to avoid feeling like a bad relative. She reached a breaking point when her doctor noted her skyrocketing blood pressure and traced it back to extreme mental strain. That's when Pauline recognized that guilt can be a subtle but devastating manipulator. Guilt and your stress chemistry. Emotional manipulation leads to a barrage of stress chemicals. Each time you experience the pang of guilt, your body unleashes a small spike in cortisol and adrenaline. While occasional spikes are manageable, repeated ones cultivate a damaging hormonal environment that undermines your cardiovascular system and immune responses. Scientists have tracked how feelings of shame or guilt correlate with increased inflammation markers in older adults. This phenomenon is documented in various geriatric studies, WHO 2021, especially highlighting the importance of healthy social dynamics in older populations. If you're persistently grappling with the manipulator's demands, your body is essentially locked in fight or flight. Over weeks or months, the burden escalates, leaving you more vulnerable to infections, fatigue, or even mental health challenges like depression. Recognizing and countering guilt manipulation is thus a critical step for self-preservation. Action plan for the guilt tripper. Addressing guilt manipulation requires a multi-layered approach. First, become aware of the patterns. Keep a journal of interactions where you felt coerced or invalidated. Each time you detect that creeping sense of guilt, pause and assess, do you genuinely owe the person what they're asking for? Or are they leveraging family ties to get their way? Next, craft assertive but compassionate responses. I care deeply about you, but I must also care for my own health. Don't over-explain. The more justifications you offer, the more fuel the manipulator has to push back. If boundary setting alone doesn't work, consult a therapist or counselor who specializes in older adult relationships. And remember, taking a break from this person, limiting phone calls or visits, can be a protective move that keeps your blood pressure and emotional well-being in safer territory. Dirty Shimon. For the boundary breaker who invades your space. Why personal space matters even more after 70. It may seem obvious that everyone needs a zone of privacy, but some relatives feel entitled to your time and home in ways that cross the line. If a cousin, sibling, or adult child walks through your door unannounced, sifts through your belongings, or overstays their welcome, you might find yourself under siege in what should be your sanctuary. Past age 70, the comfort and security of your personal space become increasingly important. You need peace to manage daily routines, health concerns, and sometimes just to rest and recharge. Boundary violators can transform your refuge into a stage for constant turmoil. This relentless invasion can spike stress hormone levels, disrupt your sleep, and intensify your sense of vulnerability. In short, it's not just a rude act, it can carry medical consequences. Case study. Regina, age 75. Regina, 75, enjoyed hosting family at her cozy home, but her nephew started arriving unexpectedly on weeknights, rummaging through her fridge and making loud late-night phone calls. Initially, Regina felt she should tolerate this because family is family. Soon she noticed her anxiety skyrocketing every evening, worried that he might show up at any moment. She felt trapped, unable to rest or watch her favorite program without fear of interruption. Her blood sugar levels rose, which her doctor partly attributed to stress. Regina felt constant dread in her own home. Finally, at the urging of a close friend, she locked her doors during specific hours and told her nephew he needed to call first. Though it was challenging, Regina found that her sense of calm returned and her physical health improved accordingly. The science of privacy and emotional health. Having control over your personal environment is paramount for well-being. Research in geriatric psychology shows that older adults have a heightened need for predictable routines and safe physical spaces to help mitigate stress. According to a study cited by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, individuals age 65 plus who reported frequent home intrusions or lack of privacy also reported higher levels of anxiety, disturbed sleep, and increased reliance on medications. Why your home is your last line of defense against life's chaos. When that space is invaded, your sympathetic nervous system can remain stuck in overdrive, leading to stress-induced spikes in blood pressure and heart rate. Such a state, if prolonged, significantly increases your risk of cardiovascular events, especially if you already have a condition like high blood pressure or a history of arrhythmia. Action plan for the invader. Begin by clearly defining your boundaries in writing, outline visiting hours if necessary, or specify that you require a call before anyone stops by. Share these guidelines politely but firmly. Lock doors, silence your phone at night, and use caller ID to screen incoming calls if you feel anxious. If someone does drop by, unexpectedly greet them at the door, and if you're not available, kindly say, "I wish I could invite you in, but I'm occupied. Let's schedule a better time." Consistency is key. If you cave even once, the boundary breaker may assume you don't really mean it. Should they continue to disrespect your space, reduce contact, or consider enlisting a supportive family member or friend to reinforce your stance? Remember, safeguarding your privacy is not selfish. It's a practical measure to protect your health. Shuri, I'm the overbearing controller. When loving concern turns into control. Some relatives overstep out of what they believe to be genuine worry, especially if they think you're too old to care for yourself properly. They might insist on dictating your diet, your doctor's visits, or your daily schedule. While a bit of concern is understandable, this can quickly escalate into emotional smothering. If you aren't free to choose your own meals or you feel pressured to follow a routine that doesn't suit you, you're effectively stripped of your independence. This is especially damaging for those over 70, because maintaining a sense of autonomy is linked with better cognitive function and emotional health. If you're forever battling controlling advice, your stress skyrockets and you may find yourself second-guessing every decision, an unhealthy state of mind that can lead to depression or physical ailments. Case study. Marvin, age 80. Marvin turned 80 last year and was happy to remain in his own small apartment. However, his daughter believed he was no longer capable of making sound choices. She would often arrive with grocery bags filled only with foods she approved. No sugar, minimal salts, zero treats. She insisted that Marvin adhere to a strict, bland diet and tried to schedule every hour of his day. Marvin felt suffocated. While he appreciated her good intentions, he started losing weight, felt depressed, and dreaded each of her visits. Finally, during a routine checkup, Marvin's physician noticed a spike in stress-related symptoms. This prompted Marvin to talk to his daughter about the effect her control was having on his health. Gradually, they reached a compromise which allowed him more freedom in food and daily activities. Why control stresses the senior body? Feeling compelled to follow someone else's orders triggers psychological conflict. Your mind whispers, "I'm an adult who can decide," while the family member says, "I know best." This inner tug-of-war accelerates stress responses and can erode self-confidence. In later life, confidence plays a major role in maintaining mental agility and a sense of purpose. According to the WHO 2021 Healthy Aging Guidelines, older adults who have higher autonomy and respect in their personal environments generally report lower stress and better overall well-being. In contrast, those who feel constantly managed exhibit higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even inflammatory conditions. Being locked into a childlike role by a controlling family member can inadvertently reduce your motivation to engage in self-care. Ironically, the controlling relative might be doing the exact opposite of improving your health. Action plan for the controller. Begin by expressing gratitude for the concern, which can soften the conversation, but then firmly assert your right to choose. Phrase it like, I truly value your care, but I know my own limits and what I enjoy. If the relative refuses to listen, propose a compromise, accept some of their help or suggestions, but retain final say on crucial decisions. Keep records of appointments, meals, or exercise routines that you're comfortable with, so you can demonstrate you're looking after yourself responsibly. If they keep pushing, consult a mediator. This could be another trusted relative or a professional counselor. Consistent pushback is necessary if the controlling behavior persists. Understand that autonomy is not negotiable at your stage in life. Without it, you face mounting stress, which endangers both mental and physical health. Teenager, Pump 6. The repeat offender of emotional blackmail. When guilt tripping becomes a full-time tactic. Although we've discussed the guilt tripper already, some relatives turn guilt tactics into a constant, unending campaign. Perhaps they say, I can't believe you're picking your hobbies over your family, or if you had a heart, you'd spend every weekend helping me. This kind of emotional blackmail can make you feel trapped and desperate. In older age, such manipulations can become especially pronounced if you've lost close friends or a spouse. The emotional blackmailer exploits your loneliness, leaning on statements like, you'll regret this when you're all alone. It's more than just an occasional pang of guilt. It's a sustained assault that plants seeds of anxiety, shame, and fear. Physically repeated stress episodes from emotional blackmail undermine vital organs and can accelerate a decline in both mobility and cognitive function. Case study. Eleanor, age 79. Eleanor, 79, had been widowed for several years. Her nephew recognized she was lonely and began visiting under the guise of offering company. Soon the visits took on a different tone. He'd say, I'm really struggling with rent, but I'm sure you don't care. Or if only I had a generous aunt like other people do. Initially, Eleanor felt she should help out. Then she noticed how manipulative his statements were. Each time he left, she was out hundreds of dollars and loaded with guilt. When she tried to set limits, he lashed out. You're going to end up alone if you keep pushing people away. Eventually, Eleanor's blood pressure spiked and she developed insomnia. A community social worker helped her see the emotional blackmail for what it was and urged her to protect herself financially and emotionally. The biological consequence of constant manipulation. Emotional blackmail repeated over time shifts your baseline stress level upward. Instead of resting in a calm state between family interactions, you remain in mild distress, anticipating the next emotional ambush. Elevated cortisol disrupts critical bodily functions. Your digestion might worsen, bone density could decrease, and cardiovascular risks rise. Studies published in the Journal of Gerontology show how older adults subjected to chronic manipulation reported more frequent visits to healthcare providers for stress-related complaints, such as headaches, fatigue, and palpitations. The persistent sense of betrayal by a family member compounds this, amplifying feelings of isolation or even depression. It's important to recognize that while you can have compassion for a loved one's struggles, subjecting yourself to their manipulative tactics is hazardous to your health. Drawing lines is not optional, it is protective. Action plan for the repeat blackmailer. Defending against ceaseless guilt tactics means setting ultra-clear guidelines. If money is the issue, fix a firm budget for what you're willing to offer, if anything, and do not exceed it under pressure. If you get the sense a conversation is turning manipulative, calmly end it. You might say, this conversation is making me uncomfortable, so I'm going to hang up now. Rehearse these lines ahead of time so you're prepared in the moment. In more severe cases, consider involving a professional like a social worker or counselor who can mediate and ensure that the manipulator's demands don't edge into financial exploitation or elder abuse. And always remind yourself the fact that someone is related to you does not obligate you to suffer emotional harm. Taking action is the best safeguard for your mental and physical vitality. The Missing Spark 7-Day Checklist for Reclaiming Your Peace. A missing spark from many well-intentioned guides is a concrete, time-bound strategy you can immediately use. Here's your 7-day roadmap to fortify your emotional environment. 1-Day 1. List out each toxic relative and identify the specific behaviors that harm you, constant demands, guilt, negativity, etc. 2-Day 2. Develop one clear boundary per person. This could be a time limit for calls or a fixed day for visits. 3-Day 3. Communicate those boundaries in writing, email, text, or a carefully worded letter so there's no confusion. 4-Day 4. Practice a no explanation refusal. If someone pushes, stand firm and calmly repeat your boundary. 5-Day 5. Monitor your physical reactions. Track your heart rate or blood pressure after each conversation. 6-Day 6. Identify a confidant or professional resource for ongoing support if boundaries fail. 7-Day 7. Reflect on your progress. Praise yourself for each improvement and decide if any boundaries need adjusting. A comment. Sucker for a year. Call to comment. Have you ever noticed this sign? Comment, I feel it if you relate, I'm safe. If not, and add a question for the doctor. Your input matters not just to me, but to our entire community of seniors who might be struggling with similar issues. Let's spark a dialogue that pushes us all toward better health and stronger boundaries. 24-hour challenge or rapid intervention. If waiting 7 days feels too long, try this 24-hour challenge. For just 1 day, make a vow to respond differently to any toxic relative. If your negative cousin starts complaining, end the call graciously after 5 minutes. If your manipulative nephew demands help, say not today, but I hope you find another solution. If you feel guilt creeping in, jot down a quick note about why you're not at fault. The aim is to break the habitual cycle. Once you see that you can do it for a single day, it becomes easier to extend your newfound confidence. Share this 24-hour challenge with friends or in online groups. By publicly declaring your intent, you're more likely to stick to it. This short sprint can be a powerful catalyst for long-term change. Why you must consult your physician before making big changes. Any shift in lifestyle or stress management, especially if you have underlying health conditions, should be done in partnership with your medical team. Whether you're altering your routine to avoid certain relatives or adopting new relaxation techniques, consult your physician to ensure you're making wise choices in line with your health profile. Sometimes abruptly limiting contact with a high-stress family member can cause temporary anxiety spikes. A doctor can guide you on coping mechanisms, possible medications for blood pressure control, or referrals to mental health professionals. Remember, nothing in this script is intended to replace professional medical advice. If you're dealing with heart conditions, diabetes, or other chronic issues, proceed under the guidance of healthcare providers so you stabilize both your emotional and physical well-being effectively. Additional strategies for long-term peace. Enforcing boundaries is just the starting line. Once you've identified and distanced yourself from harmful relatives, fill that vacuum with positive, life-affirming practices. Engage in group activities that bring joy, like a local senior arts club, walking group, or volunteer team. Cultivate friendships that energize you rather than drain you. According to Dr. Michael Greger's research, social connections rooted in positivity can significantly prolong life expectancy by lowering stress biomarkers. Also consider mindfulness or relaxation methods such as guided imagery, which helps counteract adrenaline surges. Some seniors benefit immensely from low-impact exercise like Tai Chi or gentle yoga to stabilize heart rhythm and relax tense muscles. By replacing toxic influences with healthy alternatives, you actively reshape your environment to be nurturing, boosting both psychological resilience and physical endurance. Another essential part of long-term peace is building a predictable routine that fosters security. Waking up and going to bed at the same time, planning meals in advance, and scheduling phone calls or social media time can minimize the chaotic intrusion of unwanted communications. If a known guilt tripper usually calls around 6 p.m., schedule your dinner or a calming walk at that hour, phone off, or in silent mode. This structured approach keeps you prepared and prevents jarring emotional ambushes. Over weeks, these simple habits create a fortress of stability around your daily life. This fortress is your protective shield, allowing you to weather sudden demands or negativity without losing your center. Consistency and routine has been linked to lower cortisol levels and improved heart health in older populations, making it a critical piece of the well-being puzzle. Personal stories to illustrate the journey. Let's glance at three more anonymized experiences to see how real seniors tackled toxic relatives head-on. Alice, 73, a retired nurse. She had a grown son who would only visit to complain about his financial woes, expecting her to bail him out. Alice limited those visits to once a month. Over time, she felt less anxiety, her insomnia improved, and she slowly rebuilt her depleted savings. Roberto, 78, a former truck driver. His sister's incessant negativity made him feel hopeless about every aspect of his own life. He set a firm 10-minute limit on phone calls, steering conversations to cheerful topics. Soon his energy returned, and he started going out for daily walks again. Lucinda, 70, a part-time tutor. Lucinda faced guilt manipulation from multiple relatives. After professional counseling, she used written boundaries and strictly adhered to them, resulting in drastically reduced stress levels and a new sense of empowerment. These snapshots underscore that it's possible to safeguard your peace, even when the conflict is complex and emotionally loaded. Each of these seniors felt reluctant, at first worried about appearing heartless or ungrateful, but as their health suffered, they recognized that preserving well-being had to take precedence. The common thread: they systematically set limits, refused to engage in destructive dialogues, and replaced toxic patterns with activities that replenish their emotional energy. This level of transformation doesn't happen overnight. It demands persistence and a willingness to confront discomfort. Yet the payoff is enormous: improved quality of life, emotional stability, and possibly even a longer, healthier lifespan. In every case, consulting a physician or mental health professional proved invaluable, ensuring that changes in family dynamics didn't trigger unforeseen health consequences. Darcho, deeper scientific perspective: how stress impacts heart and brain. At this stage, it's crucial to emphasize the medical ramifications of unchecked stress. Chronic emotional strain triggers a cascade that can degrade the endothelial cells, lining your blood vessels, making them less flexible. Less flexibility increases hypertension risk. Over extended periods, high blood pressure wears down arteries, heightening your vulnerability to either a heart attack or stroke. Meanwhile, prolonged cortisol elevation can hasten neural degeneration in the hippocampus, a region vital for memory. The result: cognitive decline, foggy thinking, or an increased risk of dementia. For an older adult, these outcomes can drastically reduce independence and overall quality of life. Therefore, limiting exposure to high-stress relatives is not a frivolous preference. It's a validated protective measure. Even something as simple as a daily argument can, over months or years, inflict real damage on both heart and mind. Additionally, mental health does not exist in isolation. Depression, which may arise from persistent negative interactions, often correlates with inflammatory changes that compromise metabolic health. Elevated inflammation can worsen arthritic pain, hamper healing, and even undermine the effectiveness of certain medications. Older adults are already dealing with multiple health concerns: diabetes, joint issues, cholesterol management. Adding unrelenting family conflict to the mix can push these conditions to more severe levels. That's why top experts, including those at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, frequently advise seniors to evaluate their social circles carefully. Unhealthy family relationships have a ripple effect, harming nearly every body system. If you're serious about protecting your well-being, learning to disengage from destructive relatives must become a priority, just like regular exercise or a balanced diet. Fifun, overcoming the stigma of abandoning family. One of the biggest obstacles older adults face in this journey is the cultural or familial belief that blood is everything. You might worry that distancing yourself from a toxic sibling or an adult child could make you a pariah in your social circle. People might whisper that you're disloyal or cruel. But consider this: wouldn't it be crueler to allow your health to deteriorate under constant bombardment from manipulative or disrespectful relatives? In many counseling scenarios, we remind seniors that taking a step back from a toxic relationship doesn't necessarily mean cutting ties forever. Boundaries can be fluid, adjustable as your situation evolves or if the relative shows genuine change. Remember, your first obligation is to protect your own heart, both literally and metaphorically, because no one else can fully safeguard it for you. To deal with the guilt that may accompany such decisions, look at it through a lens of self-preservation. You've spent decades caring for loved ones, contributing to society, and enduring life's ups and downs. If a family member cannot reciprocate with even minimal respect, you are within your moral rights to shield yourself. Therapists often teach detached compassion, where you still hold goodwill toward the person, but detach from harmful behaviors they exhibit. Think of it as an act of self-care. Just as you wouldn't knowingly consume a poisonous substance because it's rude to refuse, you shouldn't consistently expose your psyche to harmful emotional toxins. Over time, as you see improvements in your mental clarity and physical health, any lingering doubts about abandoning family often fade. Maintaining family ties without ruining your health. What if you don't want to cut someone out entirely? There are scenarios where a family member is mildly toxic, but not irredeemably so. Maybe they're going through a rough phase or grappling with their own mental health challenges. In such cases, you can aim for a middle ground. Limit the frequency and length of interactions, choosing neutral locations like a cafe or public park. This neutral territory can reduce tension compared to meeting at your home. You might also set conversation guidelines if they begin a negative rant. Politely shift topics once they cross a certain threshold and the meeting. If finances or favors are a sticking point, decide in advance what you are comfortable offering. Having a structured approach prevents the kind of boundary drift that could escalate stress. Remember that it's easier to start strict and gradually loosen up if the relationship improves rather than attempt the reverse. If you give a toxic relative unlimited access and then try to impose rules, you're more likely to spark fierce backlash. Thus, approach with caution, clarity, and kindness, but do so firmly. Over time, some relatives might learn to respect your stance once they see your boundaries are non-negotiable. Others might drift away because they can no longer exploit your kindness or resources. Either outcome can be beneficial. You either foster a healthier relationship or free yourself from a stressful one. This balanced approach might satisfy those who value family connections but refuse to sacrifice their mental and physical wellness on the altar of someone else's demands. Call to action: your next steps. Before we move into our final points, let's pause to emphasize, reading about this isn't enough. You must translate these concepts into real-world actions. Start with a small step. Identify the single most harmful family interaction you face, maybe a daily phone call that leaves you anxious. In the next 24 hours, limit that call's duration or politely decline it, then build momentum. If you found the 7-day checklist useful, print it out or note it down in your calendar. Each completed step is a victory for your heart, mind, and spirit. If you want accountability, share your intentions with a friend or relative who supports you. The ultimate goal is to strengthen your resilience, reduce your stress load, and reclaim the autonomy you deserve as an older adult who has earned the right to live peacefully. Call to comment reminder. Have you ever noticed this sign? Comment "I feel it" if you relate, "I'm safe" if not, and add a question for the doctor. Hearing your experiences provides invaluable insight into how these dynamics play out in real life. Feel free to share specific concerns or roadblocks you've encountered, and remember that by voicing your story, you might help another senior realize they're not alone in this struggle. Expert voices and credibility check. 3 key voices stand behind the importance of guarding yourself against toxic relationships in your later years. 1. World Health Organization WHO 2021 Active Aging Report highlights that balanced emotional environments are a cornerstone of healthy aging, noting that toxic social dynamics can hasten physical decline. 2. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health 2017 Journal of Health Psychology Their research correlates chronic stress in older adults with higher risks of cardiac events, emphasizing the urgency of addressing negative family ties. 3. Dr. Michael Greger, MD, 2015, How Not to Die, stresses that positive social connections can boost longevity, whereas constant exposure to negativity accelerates age-related health issues. These sources align with what you've learned here. Not only do toxic relatives harm your emotional well-being, but they can also sabotage your heart, brain, and overall longevity. Conclusion, rapid-fire recap. Let's bring this to a close with 3 rapid-fire bullet points. 1. Identify toxic patterns. Whether it's demanding, controlling, or guilt-inducing behavior, label it clearly so you can address it. 2. Set firm boundaries. Your home and time need unwavering protection. Don't hesitate to say no and consult your physician or a counselor for strategies. 3. Replace negativity with positivity. Fill your life with uplifting friends, hobbies, or community groups, reducing the impact of toxic relatives. Now I invite you to subscribe, and share this content if you found it enlightening. By spreading the message, you become part of a movement that empowers seniors to prioritize health and peace above all. Final question for ongoing discussion. What is one personal boundary you are determined to set from this moment onward, and how do you plan to stand firm on it? Let us know in the comments, and let's keep the conversation alive to help one another navigate these family challenges. Your insight might be the spark that transforms someone else's life.